Hello everybody, welcome back to Explain 11. My name is Micah, and today we're going to be getting into the Zibo 737-800. I'm going to be covering the FMC and the FMS, which FMC is part of the FMS, and we're going to be talking about how to program a flight and run the autopilot. This is not a cold and dark startup tutorial. My engines are already running, and everything's already operational. I'm just going to take you through the process of programming your FMC and using it with autopilot on a flight from Vancouver to Seattle. Let's go ahead and get inside the aircraft now. All right, we're inside the aircraft, so we're going to go ahead and pop down to the FMC, where we're going to begin our journey today. To start out, we're going to go ahead and hit the L1 button, the FMC, and we'll see a couple things pop up. This is basically just model information, engine rating, and navigational data. Now let me go ahead and talk about that just for a second here, because I know this will be brought up in the comments if I don't say anything. Navigational data is information that is essential when you're doing programming a flight. Now all you have to worry about is making sure whatever program you're using to plan your flight, such as SimBrief, which is what I use, and your information inside of X-Plane need to be the same. Make sure the navigational data is the same type, the same time frame, so that you don't have any issues with waypoints not being there, approaches not being there, and so forth. So today I'm using the most up-to-date version of the navigational data. It is March the 7th, 2019 when I'm recording this. So the navigational data is active and valid February 28th through March 27th of 2019. And there's a couple ways you can get this navigational data. There's several different people that sell this navigational data. I use Navigraph. I highly recommend them. Very easy to use. A little program that you install on your computer, and it keeps you up to date. They have two ways of buying their navigational data, subscription-based, and then also you can buy just sets of data that you would like, which is cheaper, but over time it'll cost more if you keep having to buy it over and over again. So make sure your navigational data is the same in the program that you're using to plan your flight as is inside of X-Plane, and then you'll be all good. So let's go ahead and jump into the FMC further. So we're going to go ahead and go to the position initial page, or POS init page, by hitting the R6 button. Once the R6 button has been selected, you'll see that there's a couple things that pop up. First, you'll see a reference airport, and also gate. So if you do a cold and dark startup, the actual positioning, you'll have to input that, but I'll cover that in my updated cold and dark startup video, which I'll be releasing here shortly. But in regards to the reference airport and gate, you don't have to input information here, but it is helpful to go ahead and do it, so we'll go ahead and do it as well. So we'll go Charlie, Yankee, Victor, Romeo, which is my starting airport's code. We'll go ahead and put that into the reference airport, which is going to be the L2 button, and it'll give the actual airport latitude and longitude as well. The gate, you can put the gate information, but really there's no particular point in it, but you can if you want. I'm not going to worry about it right now. I don't remember what gate I'm actually at. I think it's Charlie 39, but I could be wrong. So we'll go ahead and hit the route button, which was the R6 button, of course. And here you'll notice that there's already the original airport that we put in the reference has already been copied over into the scratch pad, which is this bottom part right here. So we go ahead and hit the L1 button, and voila, there it is right there. Now, if for some reason you put the wrong one, you can obviously change it. If you just go ahead and type in whatever you would like in the scratch pad and hit the button, it'll input that information in there. And then you'll see this little execute and yellow light pop up. Don't worry about that right now. Just know that you can manually input it if you need to. Destination is Seattle, which is Kilo Sierra Echo Alpha. Put that in the destination. Company route. So this is if you wanted to name the route and save it. Company route, you could name it whatever, but I'm not going to worry about that at this time. Flight number. I believe my flight number is Delta Airlines flight 0145. Putting that flight number. Runway, I'm going to be taking off runway 08 right. That's what I have programmed right now. And this is where if you put the company route, you could save it. I'm not worrying about that. I'm going to hit the execute button. That's just going to basically input the information in here. go ahead and hit the perf init page. This is performance initial page. Make sure you guys do this completely. It can cause issues if you don't. So go ahead and hit the L1 button. That's going to bring in your gross weight, center of gravity, zero fuel weight. All of that's going to be automatically inputted. It's nice to be able to do that instead of actually having to calculate every bit of that. Just make sure you hit that L1 button. It'll fill all of that in. Now reserves, we're going to put 0. And cost index. Now cost index is per airline has different cost indexes. Delta has a different cost index than American, and every aircraft has a different cost index than the other aircraft, and that's all depending on what they believe to be the most fuel efficient / time consuming rate of climb, descent, and stuff like that to actually get you there in a reasonable amount of time but save as much money as possible. You can use pretty much any number if you want. It's not really going to affect it too much. I use around 25, sometime around there. 21 would be fine, so we'll put 21 in there, and we can roll with that. I believe this is actually American Airlines 737 cost index, if I'm not mistaken. So now that's there. We're going to input the cruise altitude. Now, I'm going to be using, obviously, SimBrief creates a briefing page for every flight you do. I'm going to be using theirs, and they have assigned me a flight level of 19000, so 19,000 feet. So we'll go ahead and input that, my scratch pad, and then R1 to input it in there. Now you notice all of this information. You can fill out this, but it's not necessary for you to fill it out to actually fly the aircraft using Autopilot and the FMC. But if you would like to input the cruise degrees of wind, like so this is like where the wind's coming from, how many knots it is, Fahrenheit, all that kind of stuff, you can do that. It's not necessary, again, in regards to actually being able to fly the aircraft. So we'll go ahead and hit the execute button, and then we'll hit the N1 limit. Under the N1 limit, make sure you hit the L1 button. That's going to automatically give you your temperature, which is going to give you your N1, which is 98.0. Keep that in mind. That's essential. If you don't, you're not going to be able to go into this next part, which is takeoff. And when you put in your flaps, if you didn't have this already in here, it wouldn't actually give you your V1, VR, or V2. So make sure on the previous page, make sure you put in that temperature. So flaps, we're going to do flaps 5. And you'll notice that automatically calculates V1, VR, and V2. Now that it's all calculated, all you have to do now is actually input the route. So the route today is really easy. And there can be really, really complicated routes and then also very simple routes. And you kind of have to play around with them sometimes to get them right. Today, we're going to be flying from Vancouver to Seattle. To input the route, we're going to go ahead and hit the route button and hit the next page. Oh, it doesn't have, what? Hold on. And it does not have my destination in there. There we go. Now we're going to next page. Now that we're in the next page, I'm going to pull up my flight plan here and look at where it wants me to fly. All right, there we go. Sorry, I had to find it. So it wants me to fly directly to Waypoint Romeo Oscar Echo Sierra Hotel, Roche. So we're going to put in Romeo Oscar Echo Sierra Hotel in the scratch pad. If it's flying direct, you have to put it in here. Don't put it in via, put it in the 2. If you want direct, just hit it in the right side. So 2. Boom, there we go. So we're flying directly from this airport. Once we take off, we're going to fly directly to Roche. Once we arrive at Roche, it wants us to go and hit the Mariner 7 approach waypoints all the way into Seattle. Now, you could put all that information into here. You could put your stars, your SIDS in here, but I always found it a little bit easier if instead go to departure arrival. In here, okay, let me backpedal a little bit. whenever it actually gives you a SID, a standard instrument departure, inside of your flight plan, if it gives you a SID coming out of your airport, you have to go into departure arrival, go into departure, find the runway you're taking off from, and then whatever SID it gives you. We're not having to worry about that today because we don't have any SIDs coming out of Vancouver, but they could give you one. So keep that in mind that you have to do that first. Once that's completed, we're going to go ahead and go into arrival. KSEA, so Seattle, arrival, hit that arrival button, and we're going to find the runway that we're assigned to land on. Right now, we are arriving on runway 34 right. Now, you'll notice there's Yankee and Zulu. So Yankee and Zulu give two different approaches. Yankee is the GPS, Zulu is RNP. RNP is required navigational performance. This is basically used when ATC does not monitor you in any way, shape, or form when it comes to terrain and stuff like that. This would be used for when you're basically flying it in on yourself. ATC is not going to give you, hey, watch out for that mountain or something like that, okay? So RNY, that's going to give you your regular RNAV or area navigational approach. That's what we're going to use today. Now, notice that these stars appear. So the stars are standard arrival routes, I believe. I could be mistaken on that, but this is going to be like a way for you to get to the approach onto the actual runway. And today they gave us Mariner 7, MARNR7. Now you notice it's not showing up here. That's because you got to hit the next page button, and voila, there it is. So you can just basically have to go through and see are there the actual stars that they're actually giving you. So Mariner 7, select that. They may give you a transition. You'll notice Roche is actually a transition, so you could actually do it that way as well, but I find it best to go ahead and input it in the routes. So now that you've selected that, you can go ahead and route again. Next page, and you'll notice there's a discontinuity. That is a problem, obviously, because if that shows up, then it's going to flag it as an error, and it's going to screw up your autopilot. So it's important to go into your legs, which shows every bit of your flight plan, and make sure there's no route discontinuities. Since there is a route discontinuity, how you fix that is you hit the left button in front of whatever waypoint that you want to bring up into that blank spot. So Mariner, you notice it fills the scratch pad. Then you select the blank area, the route discontinuity. See how this is blank? Select the blank area. Voila, it makes it go away. Now you don't have a discontinuity. You also want to go through and see if there's any vectors. The vectors are generally used when you actually have ATC directing you, vectoring you into the area. Most cases with X-Plane, unless you're flying with a virtual ATC or something like that, you're not going to have them direct you in. So we're going to go ahead and select Kneel and bring it up into the vector and make it disappear. Make it disappear. So now that that's done, we're going to activate that and execute. Now, I also recommend that you go ahead and go through your entire flight plan to make sure it's correct. Now, to do that, what we're going to do here is back up a little bit. Sorry, I got a cough. All right, so now that we're backed up a little bit, we're going to select this knob right here over to plan. And this is going to make sure as you step, see this little button here that says step. As you step through, make sure that your approach looks like it'll work. And it does. This one looks like it's going to work just fine. That'll be a missed approach, and that'll be our, basically we'll just go in circles until they give us our approach back. So that looks good. So we'll go ahead and switch back to our map here. Go back to our FMC. Now that we've completed all of that information, we're pretty much done with the FMC for now. So we can go to the init ref page, which is your reference page, and this will give you your takeoff reference, which you see here is V1's 127, VR's 129, and V2's 141. Now this is important because next step is we're going to go up to the MCP, the mode control panel, which is how we activate and control the autopilot. So when we go up here, a couple things we need to remember. First, our cruising altitude was 19,000 feet. Our V2 speed is 141. Both of those we have to input into our system here. So altitude, we're going to go up to 19,000 feet. And under our speed here, IS Mach, we're going to select 141. That's right, 141. That's important because when we actually take off, we're going to hit the N1 button and let it take off for us instead of us having to, manually do the throttle here. So, and remember N1 98%, that's going to show up down here. I'm sorry, up here. See how green 98? So takeoff is going to be 98. So anyway, that's why you put all the information into that reference pages, because that helps you actually have it put together. So now that that's done, we're going to go ahead and put in our speed reference. So V1, we're going to crank it on up to 127. Right there. VR is 129. Voila. And then we're going to flip it all the way over and set it. Okay. That's pretty much it in regards to on the ground before we take off. Like I said, you can go a little bit more in detail with some of that information, like putting in the cruise winds and all that kind of stuff, but it's not necessary for you to fly. So now that I've done that, I'm going to go ahead and get everything else checked off and ready to go, and I'll see you out at the runway before we take off. Alright guys, we're approaching runway 08 right here in Vancouver. Before we get actually onto the runway, a couple things we need to do first. We're going to go ahead and activate our flight director switch and arm our auto throttle. That's going to be important once we actually turn on our autopilot. I'm going to go ahead and activate my TCAS as well and get my strobes running here. Alright. Taxi lights coming off, landing lights coming on. Got to put my flaps down. Oops. Make sure my flaps are set to the one I wanted, which is 5. And we'll wait for that to happen here before we get on the runway. Alright. Flaps are set to 5. We look like we're ready to rock and roll, so let's go ahead and get into the air here out of Vancouver and route to Seattle. Like I said, we're going to use N1 instead of manually throttling up here. And the way we're going to do that, we're going to go to 40% of our N1. We're about there right now, actually. And we're going to hit the N1 button. That's why it's important to set this. Hit N1. It's going to throttle up to 198. I'm sorry, just 98% right here. You'll notice it'll go up to 98.
80 knots.
That's all based on temperature and everything like that.
V1
Rotating. So we're going to go and pull this throttle, the yoke back to 15
Positive
degrees. We got a positive rate, which means our gear is going to come up.
400.
400 feet. 1,000 feet. So we're going to go ahead and retract our flaps here. Go and start making our turn to the south. Now that we are above 1,000 feet, we can actually activate our VNav and LNav. So VNav is your vertical navigation. LNav is your lateral navigation. So lateral is back and forth, left and right. Vertical is up and down. So if we activate VNav, it's going to control our descent and descent of our actual aircraft according to the FMC. If we activate LNav, sorry, hold on. Not on intercept course. 1 second. I get it. I'm going to turn too much. Why is it? What are you talking about? There we go. Okay. So you have to have it close to the direction you're supposed to go in order for it to actually activate. Now, once I activated VNav and LNav, you hit the command button, which is your autopilot engage command 1, because A and B technically, so command A. And from now on, it's basically going to be following the autopilot all the way up to climb, so a flat until we actually cruise. And once we get up to cruise, then there's a couple other things we have to do. But until then, we're basically sitting back and relaxing and letting the aircraft fly itself. Let me go ahead and clear this message out. So until we get up to our cruising altitude, I'm going to go ahead and let the aircraft fly and pop outside for a nice scenic view. And I'll be back with you guys once we're at our cruising altitude. Alright guys, we're approaching our top of climb right now, getting into our cruising altitude of 19,000 feet. So now that we're up here, there's one big thing that needs to happen, and this needs to happen before you hit your top of descent. This is to prevent your aircraft from being stuck at a certain altitude and not descending appropriately into the airport area. Now, the way Airbus does their system is slightly different. You have to hit the descent button. Instead, Boeing, instead of having a descent button, what you actually do is you actually lower the MCP altitude. So since we're already hit cruise, it's going to keep us there. So if I lower the altitude, unless I do a change altitude, like a level change, it's going to stay at 19,000 feet. Notice it stays at 19,000 feet, even though I dropped the altitude to 17. That's fine. That's what we want. This is basically nullifying that altitude hold, and you want to bring it all the way down to 0. If you don't bring it all the way down to 0, your altitude is going to be stuck at whatever altitude you leave on there. If it's 5,000 feet, your aircraft will never descend past 5,000 feet. It goes into an altitude hold. So make sure you bring that altitude on your MCP all the way down to 0, 0, 0. Once that's done, you can actually, the FMC, which you've already programmed, will take you on the appropriate speed and altitude all the way through the approach. So make sure you bring that altitude down to 0, 0, 0 before your top of descent. Now that's all we have to do at this point, so next time I talk, we will be all the way at our top of descent, which will be approximately about 30 nautical miles away. Alright, we're about 10 nautical miles away from our top of descent, and you'll notice one thing. First off, you'll notice the aircraft's already automatically slowing down for descent, and that's automatically calculated when you let the aircraft do that. You can actually manually change the ascent and descent rates if you want to, and you do that under the climb, cruise, and descent. This you would actually can change the target speeds of your basically your climbs and descents and your cruise speed, and you would just put the number you would want in your scratch pad and then select that button. I recommend that you just keep it standard. It works great standard, but if for some reason you have to have a really steep climb or a really steep descent, you can edit that if you need to right there. So now we're about just about 5 nautical miles away from top of descent here. We'll be descending down all the way into Seattle. And again, this is all just based off of the navigational data that's loaded into the FMC when you program it right off the bat. And just, keep in mind, if you want to keep it simple, think of it like this. When you're programming the FMC, do departure, so put your runway you're departing from, your SIDs if you have any, your route, so go to the route page, input your waypoints you have to put in there, direct, or if you're using, if it's like an airway, then you, instead of having it direct on the left side of the route page, which I'll show you right here real fast, you go in routes, and instead of it saying direct here, you would actually put in the airway that you would use. Say it was Juliet 47. You put J47 in the scratch pad and then put it in the left side from the via, and then the 2 you would put the waypoint you're going to. If you'd like to see an actual example of that, just let me know, and I'll create a short video showing that. But that's how you put in a actual airway if there's one included in your route page. I'm sorry, in your brief, your plan that's given to you by your planning software. So keep that in mind. So just remember departure, your runway, your SID, your waypoints up into your star, which is your arrival waypoints, and put your star and then your runway. So if you want to do a logical step, you can do it that way. And it's really up to you. As long as you have all the information in there and it's all listed, then you don't have any issues. Now I noticed a message came up saying drag required. I'm going to clear that out. Basically it's saying, hey, we can't slow the aircraft down fast enough. We need a little assistance. So I'll pop up my free brakes just a little bit, just to bring me down, make it a little slower. Slow me down just a little bit per its request, no problem. And we're just descending here into the Seattle area. So it's a pretty simple system when you get used to it. At first, I know it seems overwhelming, but just practice flying to different airports, different approaches. If you're doing an ILS approach, it's going to be a little bit different than your RNAV approach. Make sure you have the frequencies set in your actual radios. So make sure you have your frequencies set in here as well. That's going to allow you to fly the ILS. And inside the FMC, you won't have any issues. It'll automatically should automatically have the frequencies in there for you. So, but just make sure you put them in that radio system as well, and you'll be good to go in regards to an ILS approach. And if you'd like to see that again, just let me know in the comments below, and I'll do a short video on flying an ILS with the Zibo 737 FMC. But it's really no big difference. Just input your frequencies there, and you'll be golden. So keep that in mind if you are flying an ILS approach instead of an RNAV approach. If you have problems with the aircraft not descending, just remember to make sure your altitude's all zeros across the board, and don't forget that computers are gonna fail. They're not always gonna work, and sometimes it may be just a minor glitch. It may be a minor issue. Always be able to take control of the aircraft manually and fly it. I highly recommend that you learn to fly the aircraft completely manually first before you get into the FMC, FMS, MCP, all that kind of stuff. Although it's very useful and very handy, if you don't know how to fly the aircraft manually, when the computer fails, when it goes wrong, you won't be able to recover. And so just keep that in mind. I highly suggest you learn to fly the aircraft manually first. And once you've mastered it in regards to flying it manually, then go ahead and take control of the FMC and MCP and everything, and take care of business that way as well. But again, that's just my suggestion. You do whatever you would like to do. And yeah. So we got a little bit until we get to the approach here into the Seattle. Can't really quite see anything yet because of the cloud cover. Everything's being controlled by the aircraft itself. And it's really just a waiting game at this point. And you'll notice that the speeds incrementally go down, and that's based on the waypoint, again, navigational data. As you're descending, it's basically saying, hey, at this point, you need to be flying no faster than 230 knots. And the aircraft goes, understood, we'll slow down to 230 knots before we cross this waypoint. And it keeps your aircraft not going too fast for your approach. Which is extremely important when you're trying to land, obviously. So it's all automated, though. It's all automatically put in there. But you can also change that information as well. I guess I should show you that as well. So if you were inside the legs page, for example, you can actually change the altitude and the speed. And you just put in, let's say you wanted to change this one right here. You would put in say you wanted the same speed but a different altitude, but 210 slash, let's say it's 5,000. You could put it in like that. Or if you wanted a different speed, say 200, and then you put in the 7,000, and you could input it. But again, I would recommend just keeping it manual. But if for some reason you start having issues on a particular approach coming in too fast or something, you could manually change it if you need to allow you to slow down a little bit further out. To allow you to land a little bit better. So you can do that as well. You can manually change that. Pretty much everything that's automatically configured inside of the FMC, you can manually change. Let's see if we can see Seattle. Oh, you know what? It's below 10,000 feet. Landing lights need to come on. And yeah, I believe that's Seattle right there. So that's the runway, that long one right there. That's the runway we'll be landing on. So we're going to go out all the way out here and curve and come back around. Now, as you're approaching, you're going to manually have to put the flaps and the gear down. Those do not come out automatically. You still have to manually put those down. And that's to make sure you don't accidentally rip off the gear or the flaps or anything like that as you're approaching. It's not 100% hands off yet. I say that yet. I guarantee you, I mean, you give it 20, 30 years, the pilots are just going to sit there and watch the whole thing happen. So it will happen, I guarantee you that. Just like we're seeing cars starting to drive themselves completely. It's going to happen here in the air as well. Just giving a little bit of drag there to slow down a little bit more. After we pass through ships waypoint, we're going to go ahead and start extending our slats and then our flaps as well. And we're going to put our slats out. And you'll notice that as you put out your flaps and slats, the speed automatically changes as well. Again, all pre-programmed. Now that we have our VREF speed, I'm going to be landing with 30 degrees of flaps, so 139. I'm going to go ahead and set that. $139. Set. Now we'll go ahead and drop the 5 flaps. Now what you're looking right here is, you see these 2 empty diamonds right here? You're watching those 2 diamonds. The moment they get full, like they get solid, you can actually go ahead and activate your approach, but I recommend waiting until your VNAV and LNAV have gotten you into a generally straight line to the runway itself, as in wait until your approach has made its turn. So like once I'm on this leg, I can go ahead and activate the approach. Once these are solid, of course. If you activate it now with these not being solid, it's not going to get you anything. Look off to the left here, and I should see airport. Should be back here somewhere. Guess not. Guess it's a little bit too far in the rear for me to see it. That is okay. You know what I never did? I never switched the gears to off. I kept it in up. My bad. Let's go ahead and switch it to off now. You're supposed to do that after you take off. It goes into up position, and then as you pass about 1,000 feet, you go into the off position. But oops. I was so focused on making sure I was actually. I'd tell you what it was. So it had that error of saying, you know, not in the right heading or whatever. That error, and I was like, what is going on here? Because I've never had that error before. It's the first time I ever had that error, and of course it's when I'm recording the video in regards to the FMC. Never any other time, of course. Never, of course not. That's okay. And yeah, the issue with that was purely whenever you activate the LNAV, which is your lateral navigation, you have to make sure you're heading in the generally right direction for it to activate. We're making our left turn here in just a second. There we go. And you'll notice that the diamonds are now solid. So once you make this turn, you could actually activate the approach. I'm not. I'm going to wait a little bit longer because we're still a good distance out from the actual airport. And I generally like to wait until a little bit closer. Activate that. And what you'll see, one of the main reasons why is that the glide path will go up and down. And you have to understand these waypoints have certain altitudes you have to meet. And just to make sure we don't mess with that a little bit, I like to wait until we're just... Once we are past this one right here, right before you hit your glide slope intersection, I wait until we get towards that. That's when I start activating that. And generally that works pretty well for me. So we're going to go ahead and drop our flaps to 15 now. And you'll see runway 34 right there. Now again, remember, keeping this all the way down to 0 is important. If you don't, let's say we had it at 3,000 feet. Once we hit 3,000, I would just stay straight and level right across to go right over the airport at 3,000 feet. So make sure that's all the way down to 0. Let's drop flaps 30. Gear come down. And I'm waiting for my path to intersect with that glide slope, which is that diamond right there.
2,500.
Once that does, I'm going to go ahead and activate my approach here. Now I could activate it now, and you'll notice that it'll keep flying the altitude pretty much the same until it hits that glide slope. Notice, boop, there we go, hit the glide path. So now we're going to be following that glide path all the way in. Just make sure you hit that APP button. That's the approach button. If you don't, it'll screw you up. Now, you notice that the speed also, when you hit APP, it changed from being vertical navigation to just speed. That's why it's important to go ahead and input your VREF so that they actually talk to each other. And that way your speed's actually 139, which is what it's supposed to be when you're actually coming in for a landing. So, again, it's still flying itself completely. I'm just here monitoring it. So my auto brake, I'm going to go ahead and do a medium auto brake on a 2 right there. Nothing too crazy. Activate my speed brake here. And boom, we're on the glide path. Now it's being controlled purely by the glide path. My nose is going to start dipping down to hit that diamond right there, because we're a little high. and I'm waiting. Normally about 1,000 feet, I take over manually. It obviously depends on the conditions, IFR conditions. What does the weather look like? What's your minimums? And visibility and all that kind of stuff all plays into a factor of when you would actually take control of the aircraft again to manually fly it in all the way. But for today, I'm just going to take it over at 1,000.
Thousand feet, stabilized, missed approach altitude set.
So missed approach altitude is going to be 2,500. Go and disconnect everything. Shut up. And now everything is manual flight. And just bringing her on in, just like you would manually. Yeah, that's pretty much how you fly using FMC and the autopilot. Practice it. It'll definitely make you better when you practice. So definitely make sure that you try all different types of routes, ones with airways, ones with direct routes, everything, just to kind of get familiar with how the FMC works. Definitely would be a good thing for you to do. Yep, just going to bring her on in here. And land her, and we'll be done here. Hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you guys learned something new. If you have any questions, leave it in the comments below, and I'll be sure to answer them to the best of my ability. But until then, thanks so much. Comments, likes, subscribe. You just subscribe, hit that little bell notification so you actually get to know when I actually have new videos.
80 knots.
But yeah, that's how you use FMC with MCP and actually bring it in for a nice landing. Thanks so much, guys, and I'll see you guys next time on another X-Plane 11 video, I'm sure. Stay safe and see you up in the sky.